Hello fellow tanks, Judd here back with an update to our state of the tanks on the beta. Since our last video, we have completed all of Heroic raid testing, one boss on Mythic raid testing with Mythic Taros, and 2 Mythic plus dungeons, Ruby Life Pools and the Azure Vaults. We have just over 6 weeks until the announced Dragonflight release date. Tuning is currently underway and will absolutely change from where things are right now, but it looks like we are winding down on changes to actual class design. The channel's already popping off, so we're going to continue to release content as best we can. Subscribing, liking, and commenting helps, of course, but I'm not going to tell you how to YouTube. Let's get right into the video. Warrior has undergone the highest number of tuning changes since our last video. The dream of a mass grip lasted as long as it could, as wrenching impact, the talent that makes Heroic Leap mass grip, is gone. DKs now stand alone as the kings of the grip, as demon hunters aren't going to take chains, but we'll get to that later. There were also a series of nerfs aimed at reducing Warrior's damage and rage generation. Surprisingly, they seem to be targeted more at Warrior's single target rage generation as opposed to their AoE rage from Blood Surge. The net effect was a moderate decrease in the amount of single target rage generation, but still seemingly near endless rage in AoE situations. Seeing as the tier set is being triggered off of Revenge, which is an AoE spender, how aggressively Blizzard continues to nerf their rage generation will be something to keep an eye on. For now, it certainly isn't lacking. Speaking of the tier set, it did receive a nerf right after hitting the beta. It now gives 5% of damage as an Ignore Pain instead of 10%. The ability will create a new Ignore Pain if you don't have one active, although it does not refresh the timer on any active one. This, combined with Brutal Vitality, dramatically reduces the number of times you have to cast Ignore Pain throughout a fight. Combine this with the Leech in their kit and healing from Indomitable, the Warrior is currently one of the sturdiest, most self-sufficient tanks. One of the bigger feels bad interactions in the kit right now is trying to decide how to spin Rage during execute windows. Spinning Rage on execute can cause your tier set buff to drop, and spinning Rage on Revenge causes you to miss out on execute damage. One buff that Warriors received was damage to Shockwave. It was significant enough that it makes it less painful to allocate points into this for Mythic Plus. One other interaction to keep an eye on is between Avatar with Immovable Object and Shield Wall with Unbreakable Wall. In its current iteration, this has the potential to provide an on-demand party-wide 20% DR for nearly every source of major party-wide damage in a dungeon. This is the kind of thing that, if left untouched, could end up defining the meta for pushing really high keys. One of the bigger changes to Prot Paladin was the removal of Blessing of Spell Warding from the class tree, and they moved it to the spec tree. It is now a choice node with improved Ardent Defender. The same changes from our last video still apply, with Avenger Shield no longer generating Holy Power. There's a noticeable difference in Holy Power generation, but still, Pally feels very tanky. You still generate enough Holy Power to use Word of Glory. Shield of the Righteous uptime is much lower, but it is 4 times stronger. Bastion of Light is a very efficient use of 1 talent point. This allows you to cast 3 free Shield of the Righteous and spend your Holy Power to heal. Eye of Tyr is a good addition to their defensive power as well, having a 25% DR on a 1-minute cooldown. Avenger Shield is still a very important part of your rotation. Moment of Glory is a capstone that'll probably be considered in Raid. Combine this with that talent that I won't say 5 times fast, and Focused Enmity and Avenger Shield blasts. Barricade of Faith gives you a 10% block. Strength and Adversity should be used in Mythic Plus to give you even more parry. Tyr's Enforcer does big splash damage, and Bulwark of Order gives you a shield based on your damage done. Now when you pull with Avenger's Shield, you get an Absorb Shield to go with it. Press Divine Toll with Divine Resonance, and you do big damage and get big shields. The Paladin 2-set bonus received an update shortly after hitting the beta as well. The 2-set, Avenger's Shield, grants you Versatility of Light, increasing the versatility of you and your closest party member by 5% for 10 seconds. Note that casting Avenger's Shield while the buff is active overrides it with a new 10-second buff and does not extend the duration. This was initially a 4% verse buff for 4 seconds and had very little uptime, so the change is good. The 4-set, casting Hammer of the Righteous or Blessed Hammer, increases your parry by 4% for 10 seconds and extends the duration of versatility of light by 1 second. This tier set is fine. It's a small passive damage and defensive increase, which is in line with what Blizzard is looking for. Paladin still has great utility with Bop, Sack, and Freedom, and are probably the highest damage tanks right now, this being pre-tuning, of course. The only change to Blood DK in the last couple of weeks is changing the amount of runic power you get per heart strike from 10 to 15. This brings it back in line with how it is on live. Blood DK's playstyle has fallen about where we were expecting. It's going to be fun and challenging and reward smart play. With current tuning and talent builds, they're getting a surprising amount of healing from Blood Shield and Umbilicus Eternus. These absorbs help provide a bit more stability to their HP during fights. The rotation requires you to be in your own Death and Decay as much as possible. You use Heart Strike at least once every 6 seconds to keep up your Icy Talons and Coagulopathy buffs. Death's Caress replaces Morrowind as your Bone Shield generator outside of Dancing Rune Weapon. Blood DK's kit will pretty much always allow you to be a strong, standalone tank and raid. Their self-healing from Death Strike is still strong. They still have great mob control on the couple of fights where that's useful. However, more so than many tanks, Blood DK is going to be hurt this tier from fights where they aren't actively tanking melee attacks. Shattering Bone currently makes up a decent chunk of their damage and requires them to be dropping Bone Shield stacks. Their tier set also works on dropping Bone Shield stacks, and is nearly useless outside of those times. During raid testing, 5 of the 7 bosses had stretches of time where you aren't tanking melees. One of those is a boss that doesn't even auto at all and just casts at the current tank. There are some adds during this, but overall number of Blood Shield stacks dropped are still very low. The talent Bloodshot is an interesting way to increase your damage on those kind of fights, and how that balances out with tuning will be interesting to see. Additionally, Blood DK is the only tank that doesn't bring a raid buff this expansion, and this tier doesn't seem to have any Anduin-esque fights where their grips are particularly impactful. Brewmaster Monk is probably the one tank that you can say is undertuned right now, and has changed the least in the last few weeks. It feels more in line with how tanking in Season 1 has felt in previous expansions. The playstyle, however, is fun and interactive. They have the most damage reduction buttons in the game right now. And monks do, however, feel the loss of the passive healing attached to Cake Smash from the 4-piece bonus in Shadowlands. Expel Harm does a large amount of your self-healing, and Healing Elixir just feels underwhelming. Brewmaster does bring a few unique raid buffs. Generous Pour provides 4% avoidance, and Close to the Heart increases healing received by 4%. Mystic Touch, of course, is still passive for all monks. While they have buttons for every situation, it feels punishing if you are late to get your defensives up. Stagger and Purifying Brew are still strong, but monks are more reliant on external heals than any other tank spec. This looks to be a potential problem in Mythic Plus, where healers expect a tank to manage their own health bar. As long as Blizzard isn't too harsh with tuning, I still expect Brewmaster to be a strong choice for raid. Demon Hunter's class tree saw a redesign, and much like Warrior, one of their new toys was taken away, as Blur returns to being Havoc only. Darkness, however, remains, with an option to reduce this to a 3-minute cooldown for 1 talent point. Collective Anguish is now the bottom left capstone, and they restructured the middle section, moving Chaos Nova. Will of the Illidari and Illidari Knowledge are now more available, so you can take both without sinking points into precise sigils or longer spectral sight. The changes to the class tree are pretty good despite losing Blur, which was probably a little bit too strong to have anyway. You can opt out of Darkness and into Chaos Nova, or pick up both and just give up 3% parry. The extra Fury generation from the 2-piece tier set does allow you to play Aura of Pain for more damage as opposed to Fellblade to help with Fury. The tier set does fall in line with what Blizzard said they want from their tier sets this season. It doesn't force you into a specific build or change your rotation. It provides more Fury, lesser soul fragments, and passively increases damage done and reduces damage taken. Basically a little touch of everything you could want. There's less choice right now in the spec tree, because Frailty is far outperforming Fiery Brand builds in both damage and tankiness. The Fell Dev buffs down the middle of the tree give extra healing and shielding. The left side and the middle of the spec tree are so good right now that there's no reason to put points in the right side, which is why I mentioned nobody is taking chains. Right now the tuning knob is turned way up on Vengeance. They're top 2 or 3 in both single target damage and AoE damage, and even if Blizzard tunes them down quite a bit in the next few weeks, DH still has tools to keep them relevant. I also want to throw in that Vengeance is one of the simpler tanks to pick up, right there with Guardian Druid. You have one additional resource to manage with lesser soul shards, but Demon Spikes is simple to maintain and provides good defensives. Veldev is also a fun button to press. I would highly recommend this class for someone new to tanking, whether they're swapping roles or new to the game. Druids had their class tree changed, but don't get overly excited. The capstone talent Führer was removed and replaced with Protector of the Pact. This allows you to store up damage to increase the healing of your next regrowth. This combined with Drain of Cenarius in the class tree could potentially be tuned to relevance at some point, but for now it's essentially still a dead talent choice for Guardian. Guardian Druids did, however, get a much needed rework to their tier set this week. The 2-set bonus. Using Mangle with Gore also deals 30% of damage dealt to nearby enemies reduced beyond 5 targets. It also increases your damage done and reduces damage you take by 5% for 6 seconds. The 4-set bonus. Gore has a 5% increased chance to trigger. Using Mangle with Gore heals you for a decent amount over 6 seconds. This brought their tier set more in line with other tank specs in the realm of power and usefulness, and it is a large step up from its first iteration. Ursoc's Guidance also undergone a large change since our last video. This ability reduces the cooldown of Incarn based on rage used. In theory, this can get your Incarn down to about 2 minutes, which would be nice to line up cooldowns with 2-minute classes in Mythic Plus. In practice, however, with movement in dungeons, we were seeing a timer more like 2:15, 2 minutes and 20 seconds between uses, which is not quite as helpful. With higher haste break points later in the expansion, this could improve its value a pretty decent amount. In Mythic Plus, Guardian's current playstyle feels very similar to Live. Where some of your damage is coming from is slightly different, but the playstyle is almost exactly the same. The spec feels more tanky, however, in between Incarn than it does on Live. This is due to increased healing from your arcane damage. In single target, the rotation is changed slightly. Maul now contributes to your Ursoc's Fury shielding. You now spin Rage on Maul instead of Iron Fur if you get Tooth and Claw procs. Additionally, Moonfire will replace Swipe as your filler. Mythic Raid testing is scheduled over the next couple weeks. More dungeons will be available for Mythic Plus testing soon, but we don't have the dates on those yet. We plan to continue to release raid guides, Mythic Plus guides, as well as individual tank guides as we get ready for Dragonflight. Thanks everybody, and we'll see you in the next one.